All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Cape Cod Technology Council's coffee Q&A, our Friday casual chat with celebrities in technology. And and today we have Anna Noucas from Soul Systems, and I just want to give you a little update on what's coming up for the Tech Council. And I had that right up here. So next week we're off for the Thanksgiving break, and the following week it's going to be the first Friday in December. I can't believe it. You know, this our the timeline for our pandemic is in some ways it seems like March was 3 years ago, but I swear the last couple of months have just flown by. So on December 4th for our first Friday, which will be at 8 o'clock, we have Tom Davenport, Dr. Tom Davenport. He's a specialist in artificial intelligence. It's going to be talking about AI and the future of work. And then on December 11th, we have Samantha Gray from the Army Corps of Engineer. I imagine we'll be talking about bridges, among other things, everybody's favorite topic here on Cape Cod. And then on Friday, December 18th, we've got Victor Savarino from Savant Systems, high-end home automation company here right in Hyannis. And if you don't know, Savant Systems just bought the lighting unit from General Electric, so it's kind of a big deal. So we're really looking forward to hearing from Victor and what's happening there at Savant right here in our backyard.
I worked for 30 years for Sylvania.
Well, there we go.
That they were the enemy.
A lot of bright ideas on both sides, I'm sure.
Yeah, but business is dim.
They talked about you being the enemy.
So, our moderator today is board member, Cape Space owner, and all around community wonderful person, Robin Orbison. So, Robin, why don't you take it away?
All right. Well, thank you for that title. Very cool. All right. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. I'd like to, first of all, welcome Anna Noucas. She is an executive with Sol Systems, which is a solar development and management company. And today we're going to be talking about the business of solar. We are very excited to have her with us. And I think we'll just go ahead and get started. So Anna, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Where are you zooming in from this morning?
I'm actually in Brookline right now, in Boston.
Yeah. Okay. And is it as windy there as it is here?
It wasn't this morning when I was outside, but I can hear there's like a small alley right next to our apartment, and it like swirls every so often. So there's definitely a good amount of wind happening out there right now.
Yeah, well, it's very windy here, so you may hear some howling.
Yeah.
So we'll try to survive that and not blast off to us. Okay. All right. So let's start off by just learning a little bit about you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to team up with Sol Systems, and what your role is there.
Yeah. So I actually grew up in Fort Smith, New Hampshire. So I'm a New Englander, spent a lot of time in Boston growing up, huge New England sports fan, Boston sports fan, all that fun stuff. And my family, when I was growing up, was fairly environmentally conscious. Always volunteered for various sustainability initiatives that happening around town, just for simple things like recycling and all that kind of stuff. And so being green was kind of ingrained in me from day one. But it was always something that we did on the side or volunteered for. I never thought of it as like a career opportunity until I went to college. I went to Bowdoin College up in Brunswick, Maine. And when I started there, I, really thought and was super interested in policy and particularly American government. And really admired, a lot of the federal, representatives and senators throughout New England that have, I think, really led the charge in a lot of issues down in DC. And so was able to leverage, those relationships to figure out and sort of hone in on, how I might be able to make an impact in policy, and particularly within the federal government. At the time, Bowdoin only had an environmental studies like major, like minor, or like co-major. So you couldn't major in just environmental studies on its own. You had to pair it with something else, and the government major was that. And so I was fortunate enough to sort of create my own path where I could learn all of the policy related stuff, but then also really dig deep into the environmental studies aspect of it. Really learned for the first time in detail about renewable energy, about the incentives around renewable energy, and what the drivers for those incentives were, how they were created, and what sort of impact they could make in our day-to-day lives. And so I took what I learned at Bowdoin and ended up interning for Senator Snow from Maine for a summer, the first summer that I graduated, after I graduated, and was super excited to be on the Hill. I mean, it's an incredible place, and big things get done there. But I was frustrated by the lack of commitment, or lack of movement, I guess I should say, around climate change. I was there right after the big climate change bill in 2009 sort of failed to pass. And so there wasn't a lot of excitement around climate change. I was writing memos about deer hunting in Maine, which is important, but not necessarily what I, wanted to be doing. And so I wanted to be on the ground making an impact. I realized that pretty quickly, and was fortunate enough to find Soul Systems and just started doing research on companies, in DC that were committed to renewable energy. And at the time, Soul was doing something fairly unique. Our founder, Yuri Horowitz, just happens to be from my hometown as well, which was how we got connected. He's a Portsmouth native too. And the company that he was building, it was only 3 or 4 years old at that point, less than 10 employees. And he was building a company that he had hoped would be focused on creative financing solutions for renewable energy. Solar was a big focus of that, and his main focus at the time. And, we weren't doing the big development and financing that we are now. At that point, we were just an SREC aggregator, solar renewable energy credits. I say just, but it was more than that. It was a new concept at the time for, these renewable energy credits to be aggregated from, homeowners who have systems up on their homes, sell those credits to the utilities and get significant value from them. Beforehand, it was, how does a homeowner raise their hand? I have a couple credits a year, utility, do you want them from me? And a utility is not going to, necessarily negotiate with every individual homeowner. So what Yuri was developing at that time, along with co-founder George Ashton, was really special and a unique opportunity in the industry. And I knew I needed to be a part of it. Didn't know how or what I was going to contribute to the company at the time, seeing as I just graduated from college, but, jumped into a customer service role right away, talking to all of our customers and making sure, their needs were met. They were getting their checks on time. Squirrels weren't eating their system or what have you. And I've been with the company ever since. That was 9 years ago, at this point, a little over 9 years. The company has evolved quite significantly and added on multiple business lines, all still with that focus on creatively financing renewable energy solutions. And at this point, really, pretty singularly focused on solar. And my role evolved from that customer service associate to where I am right now, which is a business development manager for the origination of commercial and small utility scale projects for our business. And the exciting thing with that, as we have evolved, there are a lot of, developers in the space that are out there developing systems for customers. And most of the time, that's their singular focus. They're originating the customer relationship, developing the project, and then selling it off to a third party, once it's ready to go. The unique aspect of Soul Systems that we've worked really hard to build over time and find the right partner for is that the projects that I develop and that I bring, to our company, and the customers that I work with, and the relationships that we create, those projects are being sold into a fund that, we co-manage with an investor. So we have, everything that we need in-house, from, the first conversations through to the long-term ownership of a project. And I really enjoy that aspect. It's, I'm selling a product, to my customers that, the company that we're with and that, I'm standing behind is going to be involved, from day one through year 30. And it's been really exciting. And I've thoroughly enjoyed, this role that I'm in now, and excited to expand it. And Massachusetts is one of the markets that I work in. So that's why I am here now.
Great. Well, that is a wonderful story. I don't know if you have the chat open, but we have someone in the audience who is saying that their son went to Bowdoin, class of 10.
Oh my gosh.
And also worked for a senator. So you two may want to connect.
I know Steve very well.
Oh, look at that.
What a
Small world.
That's awesome. I haven't spoken with him in a while, but I knew him well in college.
That's great.
Very cool.
Okay, so Anna, let's talk a little bit more. I know that Soul Systems has basically 3 main areas of focus. And let's take them one at a time. So let's just talk about solar development. So I know in our previous conversations, I learned that solar development works a lot like the industry I came from, which is commercial real estate development. It's actually quite a similar process. But could you maybe give everybody just an overview of who the players are and how a typical deal comes to exist, and who is getting what are the economics, like which players are getting what out of this deal?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I was starting a little bit to get into that there, so that's a really good segue. So our focus as a company and the projects that we develop, we're not doing cold calls or sending cold emails or reaching out to customers that way. A project for us starts primarily through a warm introduction, through meetings like this, or, conferences, or, folks that we know locally that have a relationship with a company that's interested in solar. And so that's usually our first step is finding a warm introduction, getting a referral from a project that we've already worked on in the area, and developing, that relationship with a customer. And so the development process really starts from that first conversation, reaching out to a customer, assessing their needs. If we're having a conversation, it's probably because we've looked at your rooftop, or we've looked at your parking lot, or land that you might own next to your building, or what have you, or just a parcel that you own. And we've done some sort of assessment on it and said, okay, this is what we think the value is for this site. We think this is the size system that could work on this rooftop. And then using that initial information, put together a pretty high level package of what, a layout looks like on that site, of a system, of solar system. And then along with that, what are the financial opportunities for the customer? So it all starts in this conversation and sort of research phase and back and forth opportunity. At this point, the stakeholders that are primarily involved are, Soul Systems, our company, and, whatever customer we are talking to, which could be, a public entity or a private business. It really ranges depending on the market. And the analysis that we do on the financial side, I'll talk about Massachusetts specifically. The financial opportunity, there's a couple of them. There's a SMART incentive program in Massachusetts. SMART is an acronym that I don't actually know what it means. I probably should know that, but it's a basic incentive program in Massachusetts that provides additional value to solar projects depending on the type of project that's built. The primary driver behind it is the sale of electricity back to the utilities, and that's how the incentive is really valued. Most of the systems that we use and that we are working with right now are focused on leases. So we're on sites that don't necessarily, have a ton of load or have much like roof space or whatever to develop a system and use the electricity on site. So the electricity is sold to utility, and then we're paying a lease payment to that entity, to the customer, for the use of their land or their parking lots or their rooftop. So that's the primary incentive and revenue stream and financial benefit that we are looking to provide the customer. And that conversation, happens relatively early on, presenting, what that initial proposal looks like, what the system size is, and what the economics are. If that financial proposal, looks good, the layout fits for the site and works for what the customer's needs are, then we jump into the development phase. The really exciting portion of the project where multiple stakeholders are brought in, and my colleague Rennie, who is supposed to join us today, is really the one that leads and drives that process. He's actually on another call right now with one of the primary stakeholders that's involved in this process, the utilities, for one of our other projects. But once we get that approval with the customer to move a project forward, we then jump into this development phase like I'm talking about. And the biggest driver of the timeline for that phase is the utility, is interconnection and getting the local utility to sign off on the project that we're working on. And that's a process that takes a pretty significant amount of time to go through the studies and to go through the analysis of whether or not this solar or what the impact is that this solar will have on the grid. So the utility is really one of our biggest stakeholders in the process as we're working through the development of a system. The other primary stakeholder in that case is the town or the municipality or the AHJ that we're working with, that we also need to get approvals from, whether it's various zoning ordinances that we have to follow or get special exemptions for because of where the system is sited, and go through that process as well. Our company takes both that interconnection process and that permitting process and works through them at the same time, so that we can be moving as quickly through our projects as possible, understanding that both of those items are a little bit out of our control because we're working with third-party entities. And then the only other stakeholder that I'll mention that I kind of mentioned before is the SMART program is run by the DOER, the Department of Energy Resources, and they are the other primary stakeholder that we're working with to get approvals on our project once it's ready to be built, to get the incentive that we need for the project to move forward.
I'm going to just jump in here and just just posted in the chat, SMART stands for Solar Massachusetts Renewable Target. No wonder you had trouble remembering that. I mean, they worked hard to make it fit an acronym. We actually will have someone from the SMART program on the Q&A in early 2021. So this will be to be continued.
Nice.
Anna, what is the typical length of time from inception to going live with one of these projects?
Yeah, it really varies depending on the stakeholders that we work with and how efficiently we're able to move through those processes. I think the initial conversations that we have with a customer to work through the process of, what could work at your site, what are the financials that could work, for your business, usually could be as quick as 3 months or maybe 6 to 9 months to go through that evaluation process. The development phase, once we're fully into that work, really could take a couple of years. We have some projects that we're working on right now where the utilities have taken a significant amount of time to work through the interconnection process and the study process. And it has been, a couple of years for us to get through that completely and get all of the sign-offs and approvals that we need. So from inception of the idea and the first conversation through to getting ready to start construction, it's usually probably a 2 to 3 year process. But ideally, it's something there are points where we can accelerate a project or get it to move a little bit faster than others if, depending on the size and utility that we're working with. And most of our projects are usually at least a megawatt in size and go up to like 10, 15 megawatts right now. The Massachusetts SMART program has a 5 megawatt cap on any projects that can be qualified into the program. But, there are some opportunities where we've been able to develop multiple projects on a customer's land if they're parcellated differently or if there's a way to separate them out.
Can you help people put megawatts into perspective size-wise? Like how many square feet is a megawatt? Does it take to generate a megawatt?
Yeah, good question. So a megawatt is usually about 5 acres of land, 5 to 6 acres of land. A rooftop, we usually need about 100 to 150,000 square feet for a megawatt. That depends on how much equipment is up on the roof and what we have to, sort of build around. But yeah, those are the numbers that we generally use for megawatt.
I'm sorry, maybe I didn't catch that correctly, but why does it take 150,000 square feet on a roof to generate a megawatt, but on land you need 5 acres?
Yeah, the rooftop, we can condense the system a lot more than we would on a ground mounted, on a piece of land. So it depends on, it's the different racking structures that we can use to utilize a space on a rooftop versus a ground mount system.
Okay, and someone is asking us a question about the megawatt generation. When you say a megawatt, is it a megawatt per day, per year, per?
Yeah, I think it's over the course of the year, like the power generated, I believe over a year. I actually don't know technically.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, so we are going to, I think, move on to talk a little bit now about the credits. So when you build these projects, so a lot like, I'll keep making these real estate development analogies, I know, but I know when we built large real estate projects, we would often generate tax credits, and we were able to, trade those credits, put them in funds, and find buyers for them. And you're doing a similar thing with energy credits. So can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, of course. We do. You mentioned tax credits. One of the main incentives and drivers for solar projects in the U.S. is a federal investment tax credit that we have. It was 30%. It stepped down to 26% this year, and steps down to 22% next year. So that's one incentive that I'll mention. The energy credits, though, are super interesting, and one of the main reasons why I really got into renewable energy specifically is the development of these renewable portfolio standards, which are what the mechanism used to create the value and trading of these credits. So a renewable portfolio standard is usually developed on a state-by-state basis. Massachusetts has one, Maine has one, I think most states in New England do. And they're a mechanism that sets a specific percentage of electricity that utilities, of the amount of electricity that utilities sell that needs to come from renewable resources. Some of those renewable portfolio standards have a solar carve out within them. So Massachusetts had one of those, and that was the original incentive program in Massachusetts was SRECs, solar renewable energy credits. If there's a carve out for solar, it means there's a specific percentage of the renewable portfolio standard that has to come from solar. And so that should ideally increase the value of a solar credit compared to other renewable resources. So the renewable portfolio standard, like I said, sets that percentage of electricity that utilities have to purchase from renewable resources. And then an alternative compliance payment is set within that renewable portfolio standard. If a utility doesn't meet their percentage within a given year, they have to make this ACP payment for whatever that difference is. That ACP payment is really what sets the ceiling for the value of these energy credits, these renewable energy credits. And depending on how high that ACP is set, that will really drive, this renewable portfolio standard as an incentive within a state or not. I'll also mention that renewable portfolio standards are voluntary in some states and are mandated in others. And that is a huge driver too, in terms of the value of these credits. And so once this structure is created for a renewable portfolio standard, that's really where the value is generated and the ability to trade these credits. It's primarily the utilities that are looking to purchase the credits. And it's a pretty simple, our traders will probably kill me for saying this, but it's pretty simple, like supply and demand mechanism for setting the value of these credits. The interesting part is that maybe 10 years ago, these renewable portfolio standards, it was primarily focused on utilities purchasing these credits from systems. But now, as more and more companies are starting to set these sustainability goals, these emissions targets, and environmental related goals, there are a lot of big companies that are out there looking to purchase these credits as well. So it adds a different stakeholder to the mix of who's willing and interested in purchasing these credits. And the credit itself is for the environmental attributes. That's the term used of the electricity that's generated. So in some incentive programs, like in the SMART program, the utility, because they have this requirement, will take the environmental attribute incentive from the electricity generated, and they'll take that credit for that renewable resource. And so not all systems that are, behind the meter and using electricity on site, you're giving up that environmental attribute to the utility. But that's why companies that have these emissions goals will look to purchase these renewable energy credits, even if they're not the one using the generation from the system, because they can take that credit and count it towards, their emissions.
And do you broker these credit deals for projects, even if you're not the developer? Is that correct? So
Yeah.
anybody who's out there generating solar has credits basically that they could monetize, and but they don't have the ability to go and negotiate with a big utility or a big corporation. So they can find folks like you who can help them sell those credits.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And those customers are our primary customers, but we're expanding our portfolio more and more to work with big companies as our customers to go out and find credits for them. Microsoft, we just launched an initiative with them to develop 500 megawatts of solar. That's the development of systems, but also includes a valuable component of those credits as well. And so with that deal, it's combining all of the business lines in our company to create the most successful portfolio for Microsoft. And it has a really, really cool diversity, equity, justice, and inclusion component to it, where we're looking to site our projects for that portfolio in underserved communities, or communities that have had various environmental injustices or equity problems. And so looking to site our projects there, but then also contribute some of the revenues from the projects that's created to local community organizations that have that same mission as well.
Okay. Are you able to give everybody I guess put solar in sort of more of a global context, or maybe let's just do Massachusetts. What percent of energy generated in Massachusetts is currently generated by solar, and how much of we'll start with that.
Yeah, I think globally it's something like 2%, and even in the U.S., I think it's about 2%. Is
really small.
Yeah, really small.
What's the target for Massachusetts?
Massachusetts, I don't know the target off the top of my head, but Massachusetts itself, I think, is around like 17 or 18% of the electricity that's consumed in the state is generated by solar. So Massachusetts has done a great job incentivizing solar to get to that amount right now compared to the rest of the U.S. And I think the Commonwealth ranks in the top 10 of solar states in terms of total capacity installed.
And are you able to address, what the industry sees as a projection for that? Like, is there, by the year 2050, are we going to be at, 75% and some great number? Or?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that number off the top of my head. Within Massachusetts, the incentive programs do have megawatt targets or megawatt limits to them. So the current program is 3,200 megawatts of solar that they're looking to develop. I think that target was set to ideally, have that done within the next like 5 or 10 years. But almost 16, maybe like 1,000 megawatts of that is already applied into the program and moving forward. So Massachusetts is moving pretty quickly in that direction. And that 3,200 megawatts would more than double the capacity currently installed in the state.
Another great reason for us to live in Massachusetts. We're really lucky. We're in a very progressive state here.
Yeah, I know. I wish you could teach some things to my home state of New Hampshire about this.
Okay, we'll work on that next week. We'll ride up there. And So, Anna, I did want to give you a chance to talk about the third focus of your company, the major complex construction. Do you want to just give us a little overview of that?
Yeah. So we have a component of our company that is, focused on the construction and asset management of projects. So within the fund that I develop projects for, and then also for some of the utility scale projects that we develop as well, we serve as the asset managers for all of our projects. So we have a team of folks that are constantly looking at their computers, seeing how our solar projects are producing, and making sure that we're meeting the targets that we've set for our customers. And ensuring they're operating correctly as well. A huge component of being able to be a successful asset manager is to ensure that construction goes well. And so we have a really great team that is dedicated to the construction management of our projects and working through all of the complexities that get thrown at us at them. I stay away from it as much as I can at them while our projects are being built. And they're a really great team to work with. And I think, as complex and as many stakeholders are involved in the construction process, I think one of the things where they excel, because it can be one of the biggest complexities with construction, is just scheduling and coordination. So that's a huge component of making sure that we're getting these projects built successfully. With the types of projects that we develop, we're on site. We're using your roof space, we're using your parking lot, we're using land that's next to your building, or we're in there involved or somehow related to the operations of your business. And we take that really seriously. We don't want to be a company that, because of our needs for construction, impacts your day-to-day business. Amazon is one of our biggest customers, and we've built a lot of facilities, systems on their distribution facilities. And the amount of coordination that it takes to, get those projects successfully done is quite significant. And making sure that, we're not impacting the distribution of products from those facilities so that we can all get our Amazon packages on time. So that's a huge component of, the construction side of our business that definitely takes a lot of work. And, we're working on the Cape right now with a carport opportunity that will involve a lot of coordination as well with the customer that we're working with. And, we want to make sure that we're not interrupting their business and making sure that their business can thrive while we're putting up these carport systems at their site. And so, we haven't entered the construction phase yet, but when we do, that will be a huge component of ensuring that project's a success. So he's working with them, as close as we possibly can, to make sure that our schedule for construction matches their schedule for their events and what's going on there. I don't know if that answered your question, but
it did. And you also said something in there that leads directly to my next question. This is probably my last question, then we're going to open it up to the audience. But you mentioned something you're doing on Cape Cod. Could you talk a little bit more about the more local projects?
Yeah. So we are working on a carport system on the Cape with the Barnstable Fairgrounds. I think maybe we have a couple folks from there that have joined this call, so excited to have them on the line. And that one is a carport system that we are developing there on the Cape. And that's been a really exciting one to work on, because it's certainly taken multiple stakeholders involved in the process and making sure that, we're building systems out there that the residents of the Cape, you know, approve of, and, you know, are glad to see built, and that we're not disrupting the beauty of the Cape. as simple as it sounds, you know, making sure that we respect that beauty of the Cape and aren't, you know, necessarily changing it or impacting it, and yeah, respecting that relationship. So we've worked really hard with some local stakeholders to make sure that that happens, and, you know, with the town of Falmouth to make sure that we are doing what we can do to ensure that's a successful project.
So that brings up an interesting question. But I have heard people say this. I mean, I have heard people say they don't want to look into solar because they don't want it on their roof because they don't like the way it looks.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I know it's kind of like it sounds a little frivolous, but I mean, is the industry at all looking at ways to make installing solar be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing?
Yeah, there have been some really fun types of panels. So the solar modules that have been, you know, put on the market with different colors or, you know, shapes or like thickness or whatever to make it a little bit more appealing. I think the product that's going to make the biggest impact are the roof tiles. So actually replacing the tiles on your roof with a miniature solar panel that looks like a roof tile. You know, Tesla is really the one that has taken that as far as they have, and really pushing that type of product. There are other companies that have similar products out there, but I think that's probably the one you know, creative solution that's really in the market right now. That's super interesting. So,
well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're going to start taking some audience questions here.
Cool.
And I'm going to actually ask some of the audience to unmute for their questions. And I'm going to call on Carol Armitage. You've got a question here. Would you like to unmute yourself and
Sure.
tell Anna what your question is?
Sure. So Anna, I was curious, like, what is the biggest technology challenge? Is it that the efficiency of the solar cells is continuing to increase, but it's not really that great yet, and so the price is coming down, but not fast enough? Is it the life of the solar panels, like it's only 20 years, it needs to be 30 years? Is it what to do with the dead panels in terms of recycling? Like, so just from a technology point of view, what do you think the biggest challenges are?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To the first couple of items that you brought up, the efficiency of the panels has come a really long way, and the sizing of the panels too has been something that even in my 9 years in solar, I was first talking with customers about panels that were sized to 195 watts. Panels that we're looking at right now are upwards of 400 to 450 watts. So that's helping us to you know, condense the space that we need to build the same size system. And there still is room to grow there. I think that the amount of space that solar takes up probably is one of the biggest challenges, just compared to other renewable resources and other you know, types of generation. We require quite a bit of space comparatively, but the industry is evolving, you know, quite significantly in that way, which is super exciting to see. And then the last one that you brought up that was really interesting is the recycling of these panels and of the equipment. I don't know if the industry has a complete answer to that, but it's something that we are talking about constantly, and making sure that there is an opportunity to, you know, recycle the panels in a way that's not going to impact the environment in the future. And then, you know, the life of these systems is growing, you know, more and more as the technology evolves, which is really cool to see too. In Massachusetts, the incentive program is 20 years. So that's primarily the length of the contracts that we enter into. But the modules have warranties for 25 years, and the system life is usually something like 30 to 35 years. So other projects that I work on in the Midwest, we're executing contracts for 30 years, which is quite a long period of time, and hopefully I'm retired by the time those contracts come up, but we will see.
All right, we've got a question here from Henry. He wants to know if you were involved in the carport system at Kenyon's Market in East Falmouth.
No, we weren't, but we talk about that system all the time. So whoever did develop it, we thank them for having a reference for us that we can be using when we're talking about our project in Falmouth as well.
Okay, great. And then we've got a question here from Steve. Actually, Steve, do you want to unmute yourself and pop in here at the risk of hearing more about sheep?
We talk about sheep forever. I probably shouldn't have said that.
It does have something to do with open space, and apologies if you covered this, excuse me, earlier in the session, but as you know, here on the Cape and certainly all over the country now, there's an increased sensitivity to environmental issues. And I know in Sandwich, there was a proposal by somebody to develop a large parcel of land that was going to require a clearing of forest and other natural growth to open up the space for a solar farm. How are you, kind of broadly speaking, addressing the balance there? Because there is a balance. I mean, there could be a justified reason to clear. On the other hand, we don't have that much greenery absorbing carbon on the Cape. We certainly could improve that. What's your company's view? How are you addressing the potential impact of ground-mounted solar?
Yeah, the simple answer is that we avoid having to clear trees at all costs. We are primarily focused on, and the Commonwealth has developed an incentive program that is increasingly focusing on space that is already being utilized for something else. So a lot of our systems are on rooftops, they're on parking lots, they're on landfills or brownfields, locations that are already impacted in one way, so that we don't have to make, that other impact of clearing trees. And that's a huge issue in the Commonwealth right now, and it's certainly an issue in other states as well. But I think Massachusetts is really ahead of the game there in trying to incentivize projects away from that traditional ground-mounted system where trees need to be cleared. So we try to avoid it at all costs. Not every project is going to be completely clean like that. And so we've gotten creative on some other opportunities where, if it's depending on the amount of tree clearing that needs to happen, we've thrown around the ideas of, we'll clear X number of trees and plant the same number of trees somewhere else, where there's available space, which I think is a really, really interesting idea. It's not the perfect one for one, but at least, makes some sort of impact, hopefully in the future, to take away from the trees that were cleared.
Yeah, well, I think that's a realistic approach.
Yeah.
It won't satisfy everybody, but at least there's an awareness and an effort.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Anna, could you talk a little bit about who the investors are? Where's the money come from for these projects? I would think that they generate exactly the kind of long-term steady cash flow that institutional investors are looking for. So I'm guessing it's a lot of pension funds and insurance companies, but could you just address that?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. One of our investors that we've been working with for the longest period of time, 7 or 8 years, is Nationwide Insurance. They became one of our investor partners specifically for the tax equity component of it. So they would purchase a portion of the system to take advantage of the tax credits. So Nationwide Insurance is one of those investors that we work with very closely on all of our projects. Regional and national banks are some of our partners as well. And then the fund that I develop projects for is an infrastructure fund that is composed of a number of different investors, behind the fund, but one of them is the California Teachers Pension Fund that is a part of it. So you answered the question for me, Robin.
And are your bank relationships, are they providing sort of more conventional financing, like construction loan financing?
Yeah, so the bank
With
relationship,
debt, in other words, yeah.
Yeah, the bank relationships, it's a little bit of both. So the permanent debt for our projects in our fund, but then also we're working with some banks for the tax equity component of it too. So they'll, like Nationwide, purchase a portion of the system and take advantage of the tax credits for the long term.
And another question here from Henry. If you're able to share, what's a typical ROI for one of these projects?
Good question that I probably can't share, and it varies quite a bit, but I may be able to follow up with you separately on that.
The reason why I have solar panels on my house, and I estimate the payback to be between 6 and 7 years with electricity generated, not used, and then 4 or so SRECs I generate.
Mm-hmm.
So I would assume like the Kenyon project would have had a much better payback.
Yeah, it very much depends on the state and the incentive programs involved. I think the 5 to 7 year range is probably what you see in most places.
Okay.
Some of the other projects that I develop in the other market that I work in is Nebraska, and the payback there is a little bit longer, the 7 to 10 year range for most of those projects.
Steve says hello.
Sorry?
Steve says hello, by the way.
Oh, tell him I say hi back. That's awesome.
All right, I think we've got time for one more question here, and I'm going to give it to Eldon. So Eldon, front and center. You unmute yourself.
Okay, got it. Yeah, the question was, one of the problems potentially of decades-long payback periods is that new technology will come along that economically obsoletes what you've installed. How do you account for that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question that I would say we build the flexibility into our contracts or, into our projects to be able to take that pause if after 10 years it looks like it's economically viable for us because the efficiency of the panels has increased so much, or the capacity of the panels has increased so much to spend the money to decommission that system and build a new one. I think it's something that will just be an economic assessment for us over the long term of our projects, but certainly something that we keep in mind, especially as we're looking at longer and longer contract terms.
Thank you.
And I assume that you build into your you build capital expenditures into your long-term projections, knowing that there's going to be a certain amount of upgrade and replacement that has to happen along the way.
Yeah, for example, inverters are usually only a 10-year warranty, 15-year warranty. And so that's a component of the system that we're just automatically building in the cost to replace those, in year 10 or year 15 or whatever it is. So, yep, you're exactly right there, Robin.
Okay, well, I think that brings us to a close. So Anna, I want to thank you very much for being here with us. It's been a
Yeah.
very interesting, informative conversation and a pleasure. So thank you, and we hope to see you again. I know you're a member, so we hope to see you
Yeah.
online here with us again soon. And I'm going to turn it back to Bert to take us home.
Robin, thanks so much. And Anna, thanks so much for all that great information. Really wonderful to see what's happening here in the solar space. And thanks to everybody here for participating today. Thanks for the great questions. Thanks for listening in. If you have further questions, you can email me and I'll make sure that it gets to Anna. And otherwise, have a very safe and happy Thanksgiving. Remember, Zoom is your friend for Thanksgiving. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next event on December 4th. So take care, everybody. Enjoy your day.
Thank
Great.
you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
you.
Great weekend.
Good job.
On to leaves.